Hello, my name is Bret, Jr., and today I would like to compare the effects of the caffeine ingestion on time of exhaustion between endurance trained and the untrained man. Ever since the 1970s, caffeine has been used in a variety of activities such as social activities and exercising. Caffeine works with the major body systems such as the cardiovascular and central nervous system. They act as an aerogenic aid on these systems. The effects on these systems can be harnessed to lengthen the amount of time athletes can perform until they reach exhaustion. In past studies, caffeine effects on the human body, researchers have only used athletes as test subjects, whereas very little research has shown caffeine effects on an untrained human. So, this research paper's purpose is to show if untrained endurance individuals will respond more or less to caffeine than a trained endurance athlete. Thus, they had to define a way to determine the difference between an untrained endurance participant and a trained endurance participant. This study contained 20 male participants at the University of Dayton, separated into two groups that were determined by their VO2 max. The participants with a VO2 max within the 40th percentile made up the trained group, and the bottom 40th percentile made up the untrained group, where then the double-blind experimental design was used to determine the data and the results. So the way they set this up was they took the 20 individuals and they separated them into two groups, the untrained group and the trained group. Then they furthermore split those groups up into the placebo groups, or the control groups, and the caffeine groups, which actually showed if there's an improvement of performance due to caffeine supplements. So then they had to figure out how to set up the trial. So, the study was performed at the same time and location for everyone participating in the study. The participants performed until exhaustion at 80% of the maximum workload, with a range of 48 to 96 hours of recovery time between trials. Then when the time came to run the trial, participants had to intake caffeine within their mounted body weight or take a placebo to determine the control groups, and the following data was discovered. So what they thought was happened was that the trained participants would respond more to caffeine supplements than the untrained group. However, what actually happened was that there was no significant difference between the trained and untrained groups. The combination of the untrained/trained versus the combined placebo group showed that no significant benefits due to caffeine intake as well. So the trained and untrained group results go as follows. The mean time of exhaustion seen in Table 3 was 786.4 seconds with a standard deviation of plus or minus 251.5 seconds for the placebo trial. And for the caffeine trial, the trained group, they had a mean time of exhaustion of 810.7 seconds with a slightly lower standard deviation of 209.4 seconds in either direction. This showed a slight improvement of performance time by only 3.1%. So then we move on to Table 4. Table 4, the results show the results of the untrained group. The placebo trial had an average mean time of 514.6 seconds with a standard deviation of 107.8 seconds standard deviation. Then the caffeine trial resulted with an average mean time of 567.3 seconds with a standard deviation time of 140.5 seconds. This showed an improvement on the performance of 10.2%, whereas in compared to the 3.1% of the trained group, the untrained group actually showed a greater performance, which went against what they originally thought. So, the results were to be expected that the trained participants would benefit more than the untrained participants, but both groups would benefit from the caffeine use to some degree. However, in this study, there was not a significant difference between the two groups, and that the combined groups did not significantly benefit from caffeine when they compared to the results of the combined placebo trial. Thus, in this study, where the researchers used a double-blind study to determine if there was a difference between untrained individuals using caffeine as a supplement and a trained athlete using caffeine as a supplement, determined that there is no significant difference between the two groups. Also, this study determined that an overall performance of combined untrained and trained participants, that there was not a significant difference between the ergogenic effects due to caffeine versus not taking caffeine supplements at all. So, this ends my conversation about the effects of caffeine on an untrained individual and a trained individual. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.